The call was placed at 4:07 a.m. on May 11, 2012, from a house on Victory Road in Derby, England. The voice on the other end was not calm. It was a frantic plea for help as smoke began to fill a three-bedroom council home. Neighbors who were awakened by the commotion would later describe hearing the sound of children screaming from the upper floors. Their small voices quickly drowned out by the violent crackle of flames that seemed to consume the structure with impossible speed. Firefighters arrived to find a scene of total devastation. The heat was so intense that the windows had shattered inward, and the bedrooms upstairs had become furnaces, with temperatures reaching over 500 degrees Celsius. Inside, they discovered 6 children: 10-year-old Jade, 9-year-old John, 7-year-old Jack, 6-year-old Jesse, 5-year-old Jayden, and 13-year-old Duwayne were pulled from the wreckage. Jade, John, Jack, Jesse, and Jayden were pronounced dead at the scene. Duwayne was rushed to a hospital, where he held on for 2 days before his body, too, succumbed to the effects of smoke inhalation. In the immediate aftermath, the community responded with profound grief. Neighbors wept openly in the streets. A local man was so moved by the sight of the father standing outside the ruined home that he established a charity to help cover funeral expenses. He told reporters that the father, Mick Philpott, had loved his children desperately. But the investigators sifting through the ash saw something the public did not. The fire had originated at the front door, specifically in the mail slot. The pattern of the burn was too clean, too concentrated. This was not an electrical fault or a cooking accident. An accelerant had been poured into the home, and someone had deliberately lit a match. The investigation into the deaths of 6 children was about to reveal that the grieving father standing before the cameras was not a victim of tragedy, but its architect. To understand how a father could orchestrate the death of his own children, one must first understand the man who existed long before the fire. Mick Philpott was born in 1956 in Derby, England, and his life was defined by a pattern of control, violence, and manipulation that began in his teenage years. At 19, he charmed a 15-year-old girl named Kim Hill. She initially saw him as an ideal partner, but that illusion disintegrated quickly. Philpott's violence was not hidden behind closed doors. It was public and unapologetic. In one incident at a pub, he struck Kim across the mouth with a pool cue, and she bled severely as onlookers did nothing. He used any perceived slight as justification for brutality. When Kim paid attention to a baby she was minding, he broke her arm and fractured her kneecap with a hammer. When he returned from army postings, he would accuse her of infidelity and beat her. He once shot her in the groin with a crossbow because he felt her dress was too short. For 2 years, Kim, still a schoolgirl, lied about her injuries to protect him. But in July 1978, she found the courage to send him a breakup letter. Philpott's response was not sorrow, but rage. He went absent without leave from the British Army and broke into her home while she slept. He attacked her in her bed, stabbing her 27 times with a 9-inch knife. As he did so, he told her menacingly, "If I can't have you, no one else will." When Kim's mother intervened, he stabbed her 11 times. Paramedics arrived to find Philpott on the stairs, still holding the bloody knife, and he told them not to bother because he had done a good job on her. Kim died twice that night, once in the ambulance and again on the operating table. Surgeons saved her life, but the psychological scars would remain for decades. Philpott was found guilty of attempted murder and grievous bodily harm. The sentence was 7.5 years. He served just 3 years and 2 months, released early for good behavior. While in prison, he sent Kim letters expressing remorse and even proposing marriage. Kim later reflected on her life with him, stating simply, "Do not say no to Mick Philpott. You don't say no to him. He doesn't understand the word." The justice system had given him a slap on the wrist, and he understood that message perfectly. There were no real consequences for his actions. After his release from prison in 1986, Philpott married a woman named Pamela. They had 3 children together, and the cycle of abuse continued. Pamela was too afraid to report him. She knew what had happened to Kim Hill, and she prayed that he would move on to someone else. Her prayer was answered. In 1993, Philpott, then 37 years old, began a relationship with a 14-year-old girl named Heather. Pamela left him after discovering the affair, and Heather ran away from her parents to be with him. On her 16th birthday, they had the first of 2 sons. The violence that had defined his previous relationships continued without pause. He beat Heather for failing to give him a daughter. He taught his older sons to be violent against her. When she tried to leave him, he held a knife to her throat. She was often punished by being locked out of the house in the garden, left outside regardless of the weather. She eventually escaped by climbing over a fence, forced to abandon her children temporarily before regaining custody after a long legal battle. Heather described him as a Jekyll and Hyde character, charming when they first met, but violently controlling when she was trapped. In 2000, Philpott found his next target. Her name was Mairead Duffy. She was 19 years old, a single teenage mother who had recently left an abusive relationship. To her, Philpott appeared as a guardian angel. They moved in together quickly. He took on responsibility for her son and proposed to her in the hospital after the birth of their first child together the following year. But Philpott was not finished. He began a relationship with a 16-year-old orphan named Lisa Willis, a single mother who became his mistress and moved into the home he shared with Mairead. Perhaps because of Philpott's domineering presence, the 2 women became close, confiding in each other, and Lisa treated Mairead's children as her own. The pattern was unmistakable. All 3 women, Kim, Heather, and now Mairead and Lisa, had been teenagers when they met him. They were vulnerable, and he had effectively groomed them, establishing control before they were old enough to understand what was happening. By 2003, Philpott had constructed a household that defied conventional understanding. He married Mairead in May of that year, with Lisa serving as the bridesmaid. From that point forward, he lived with both women in a 3-bedroom council house, and together they raised 11 children. Both women worked to support the family. Philpott remained unemployed, collecting their earnings and supplementing the household income with government benefits. He actively sought to have more children, understanding that each new birth increased the benefit payments he received. He requested a larger council house to accommodate his growing family, but his request was denied due to lack of availability. Rather than accept this, Philpott took his case to the public. He appeared on a television program in 2007 to defend his lifestyle. On the show, he expressed pride in his large family and dismissed his critics. He blamed the council for not providing adequate housing and argued that as an unemployed person, he deserved more assistance from the government. He introduced his wife and his mistress to the audience, openly acknowledging the arrangement. When the host challenged him about his parenting and his refusal to work, Philpott became agitated. He claimed he could not get a job due to media coverage and his criminal record. He insisted he had undergone a vasectomy, though the birth of additional children after this claim suggested otherwise. At one point, he made an offensive gesture toward the host and told him to direct his questions elsewhere. He declared that he did not care what the public thought about his lifestyle. The appearance cemented his public persona. He was dubbed Britain's biggest scrounger after it was revealed that he was receiving approximately £25,000 a year in benefits. That same year, a member of parliament spent a week with him in an attempt to persuade him to change his lifestyle. She found him 3 jobs. He did not show up for the first day of work, and the job offer fell through. During the documentary that followed, Philpott was shown living in a caravan in his garden, where his wife and mistress would alternate spending nights with him. The MP noted that Philpott did not care about anyone and that he used a derogatory term to refer to both women. She also observed that none of his children sought affection from him. In the weeks leading up to the custody hearing, Mick Philpott enlisted 2 people to help him execute a plan that would have catastrophic consequences. His wife Marie had proven her loyalty to him time and again, enduring his abuse and standing by him through years of public scrutiny. The second was a family friend named Paul Mosley. The plan was disturbingly simple in its conception. Philpott would set fire to the family home on Victory Road. He and his accomplices would pour gasoline through the mail slot and ignite it. Then Philpott would use a ladder he had placed at the back of the house to climb through an upper window and rescue the 6 children who were sleeping inside. In his mind, this would accomplish several goals simultaneously. It would make him appear heroic, a father risking his life to save his children. It would ensure he won the custody battle against Lisa. And crucially, he intended to frame Lisa for the arson, painting her as the unstable one who had tried to destroy the family. The plan was set for the night before the custody hearing. Philpott believed he had calculated everything. He had arranged for a ladder to be positioned at the rear of the house for his dramatic rescue. He had secured the cooperation of Marie and Mosley. He had his story ready, a disgruntled ex-girlfriend seeking revenge. What he failed to account for was the nature of fire itself. Petrol, when poured into an enclosed space and ignited, does not burn slowly or predictably. It explodes. The flames do not wait for a planned rescue. They race upward, consuming oxygen and filling every available space with superheated gas and toxic smoke. On the night of May 11th, Philpott and his accomplices put their plan into action. In the early morning hours, they poured gasoline through the mail slot of the house on Victory Road. Someone lit a match. What happened next was not the controlled fire Philpott had envisioned. It was an inferno that moved with terrifying speed, climbing the stairs and reaching the bedrooms before anyone inside could even fully wake. The 6 children sleeping in those rooms never had a chance. The ladder Philpott had placed at the back of the house remained unused, a silent testament to a plan that had failed in the most devastating way imaginable. In the hours after the fire, as the smoke still rose from the ruins of the house on Victory Road, Mick Philpott began the most important performance of his life. He stood outside the wreckage with his wife Marie and spoke to the cameras that had gathered. His face was arranged in an expression of grief. His voice cracked as he described the loss of his children. The community, unaware of the truth, responded with an outpouring of support. A local man was so moved by what he believed was a father's anguish that he established a charity to help pay for the 6 funerals. Fighting back tears, he told reporters that Philpott had loved his kids desperately. He said, "Yeah, they can slag him off, but he loved his kids. Yeah, you make mistakes, but you don't deserve that. Nobody deserves that." The statement was a testament to Philpott's skill as a manipulator. Despite a decades-long history of violence, abuse, and grooming, he had maintained a public image that allowed people to see him as a devoted father. The police organized a press conference where Philpott and Marie spoke publicly. During this conference, Philpott thanked various people for their support and announced their decision to donate Duwayne's organs to save the life of another child. He expressed gratitude for the community's response and requested privacy for his family. But investigators were watching closely. They had already determined that the fire was deliberately set, and Philpott's behavior was raising alarms. A mortuary manager reported that when Philpott came to view his children's bodies, he did not behave like a grieving father. Instead, he engaged in horseplay, even putting a family liaison officer in a headlock during one visit. Worse, a female police officer reported that Philpott had flirted with her, calling her gorgeous and implying that he would like her to come back to his hotel room. This was not the behavior of a man who had just lost 6 children. It was the behavior of a man who believed he had gotten away with something. While Philpott continued his public performance, the police were building a case against him. Forensic investigators had discovered a discarded petrol container and a glove near the house. When they examined the clothing of Philpott, Marie, and Paul Mosley, they found traces of petrol. The evidence was mounting, but the police needed more. They wanted to hear what the 3 suspects would say when they thought no one was listening. In November 2012, Investigators placed a recording device in the police vehicle that transported the suspects and in the hotel room where Philpott and Mayreed were staying. The conversations captured on those recordings were devastating. Philpott was heard coaching his accomplices on their alibi. He told them, "You definitely sticking with the story? I didn't mean to do it, on my life." He was heard taking responsibility for the deaths, saying, "It's my fault we lost our children. It's my fault we lost our family." But it was what else the recordings revealed that exposed the full moral decay at the center of the conspiracy. The tapes captured a moment where Philpott watched his wife, Mayreed, perform a sexual act on Paul Mosley. Afterward, Philpott was heard telling her, "I'm proud of you." In subsequent police interviews, Mosley would admit that he had sex with Mayreed over a snooker table just hours before the fire was set. It was believed that Philpott had encouraged this activity to ensure Mosley remained loyal to their cause, binding him to the conspiracy through a shared secret. The recordings also revealed the trio discussing the case against them, trying to find inconsistencies in their stories that the police might exploit. Philpott's voice on the tape was not the voice of a grieving father. It was the voice of a man managing a criminal enterprise, ensuring his co-conspirators did not break under pressure. The police now had everything they needed. The ladder found at the back of the house, intended for the failed rescue. The forensic evidence linking all three to the fire. And now, the recordings, in which Philpott effectively confessed while trying to hold his conspiracy together. The trial that followed the arrests of Mick Philpott, Mayreed Philpott, and Paul Mosley laid bare the horrifying details of the conspiracy for the public to see. The prosecution presented a clear narrative. Philpott had orchestrated the fire to exact revenge on Lisa Willis for leaving him, and to regain custody of her children so that he could continue collecting benefit payments. The ladder found at the back of the house was intended for a rescue that Philpott believed would make him appear heroic and secure his victory in the upcoming custody hearing. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. Petrol residue on the clothing of all three defendants, the discarded container near the scene, the consistent witness testimony about Philpott's strange behavior after the fire, and the recordings which captured Philpott coaching his accomplices and taking responsibility for the loss of his children. However, the prosecution faced a significant legal obstacle. They could not prove that the three defendants intended to kill the children. The plan, however misguided, had included a rescue component. The murder charges were downgraded to manslaughter. In April 2013, the verdicts were delivered. Mick Philpott, Mayreed Philpott, and Paul Mosley were all found guilty of manslaughter for the deaths of the 6 children. The judge, in her sentencing remarks, made no effort to hide her contempt for the actions of the three. She stated that the fire was clearly Philpott's idea. She said that Mayreed's children had died because she put her husband first, choosing to participate in a plot that she must have known could have deadly consequences. She described the crime as one of staggering arrogance and selfishness. Mick Philpott received a life sentence with a minimum term of 15 years. Mayreed Philpott and Paul Mosley each received 17-year sentences, with a minimum of 8.5 years to be served before they would be eligible for parole. Mayreed later appealed her sentence, arguing that it was too harsh. The Court of Appeal judges rejected her appeal, stating that the original term reflected the immeasurable harm she had caused. They noted that petrol found on her clothes proved she had participated in setting the fire, and that the plan was not a spontaneous mistake. They said she had lied after her arrest and continued to hide the truth during her trial. In the years following the trial, the public was confronted with a difficult reality. The sentences handed down to the three defendants were not as final as they had seemed. In November 2020, Mayreed Philpott was released from prison after serving exactly half of her minimum term. She was eligible for release on license, and she was taken by convoy to a halfway house. A source described the convoy as one given to a celebrity rather than a mother who had killed her 6 children. She was given a new identity for her protection, allowing her to disappear into a life that her own children would never have. The Center for Crime Prevention called her release appalling and argued that killers should be required to serve their full sentences. Paul Mosley was released from prison in May 2021 after serving half of his minimum term. He was returned to prison in 2022 for breaching the terms of his parole, but in November 2023, he was released again. A parole panel stated that imprisonment was no longer necessary for the protection of the public. Mick Philpott remains in prison, serving his minimum 15-year sentence. But even that term will expire. The public outrage that accompanied the trial has never fully subsided. Many argue that 15 years for orchestrating the deaths of 6 children is a fraction of the justice that was owed. The 6 children who died in that fire have names and stories that deserve to be remembered. Jade was 10 years old, described as very intelligent and well-regarded at school. John was 9, cheerful, smiley, and polite. Jack was 7, the quietest sibling, a delight to be around. Jesse was 6, described as the loud character in the family. Jayden was 5, a boy who loved cuddles from family and friends, shy and bashful. Duwayne was 13, charming and caring, the protector of his younger brothers and sisters. They were not cash cows. They were not bargaining chips in a custody battle. They were children who deserved a father who would keep them safe. Instead, they were given Mick Philpott, a man whose greed, narcissism, and psychopathy led him to view his own children as assets to be leveraged. And when those assets were threatened, he chose to burn them rather than let anyone else have them.